Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this, we hope, interesting and informative session of the Berks Alliance Spotlight Program. I'm Dave Myers, the director of the Berks Alliance, and I want to thank you for joining us on this beautiful fall day. Hopefully this is an inspiring and interesting topic we're going to talk about here in a minute. I'm going to turn it over briefly to John Weidenhammer, who's the chair of the Berks Alliance. John?
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for organizing this, as Dave always does, and thanks to our presenters from Albright. We have a particularly interesting topic today. I know a lot of folks are curious and interested in what's going on at Albright. Some of you know that I was a trustee at Albright for nearly 20 years and graduated as a trustee emeritus, which is a status that I'm proud of. Also, Albright turns out to be, quite an important pillar in the northeast section of Reading, which is one of our great neighborhoods in the city. So I kind of feel that as Albright goes, so goes that neighborhood. So Albright's success really is linked very, very closely to what's going on in that area that some people call College Heights, east section of Reading. So with that, fasten your seatbelts, get ready for a great presentation. Dave's going to introduce Tom and Christine from Albright. So Dave, back to you. And thanks everyone for participating today.
Thank you, John. I'm going to remind everyone to mute your microphone so we don't get a lot of background noise. We've had some issues with that in the past. But keep your cameras on because it's always good to see that we're talking to real people. We will have our formal presentation and we'll follow that up with questions and comments. Please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to raise your questions and comments, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of them. Any ones that we don't get to, we will share with our presenters when the program is over. I'm sorry, I'm still admitting a bunch of people here. We have a whole lot of people coming today. As I said, we'll record it, share it with you. We also post it on the Berks Alliance website, and we share it with BCTV. And you should feel free to share it with anybody who you think might find it of interest. We have a terrific topic today. As John mentioned, it's a very important one for this community. Albright College has been an anchor in this region for a long time. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the future is going to look like for Albright College. I have the honor to introduce Tom Shepard. He's our presenter today. He's Albright's Vice President for Advancement and a proud Albright alum. He has more than 30 years experience in higher education. After earning his degree in computer science and math from Albright, he began a career as an advancement as a director of Albright's annual fund. He spent almost 2 decades at SunGard working with higher education clients. And for 9 years, he served as the Associate Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at Lehigh University, where he led advancement operations, services, annual giving, alumni relations, and campaign. In 2017, he became the Associate Vice President for Advancement Operations at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. He served as a member of advisory boards of software companies as well as industry associations. His passion and talents are in bringing people together, systems and processes to support the important work of philanthropy. But now to the important stuff. Tom is married, has a daughter, son-in-law, 3 lovely grandchildren who live in Virginia, hopefully come to college in Berks County. He's run a marathon in all 50 states. So we'll have to have you talk about that a little bit, Tom, when we get to it. And he enjoys biking, reading, theater, and music. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Chavez.
Dave, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for being here. John, thanks to you for supporting this effort. And we really appreciate everyone being here today. And I'll have a colleague I'll introduce in a little bit from Albright as well. Listen, I could spend hours talking about my work outside of Albright and my hobbies. I really enjoyed running a marathon in every state. It was a great way to see the country. Much support from my wife and running friends I'll just share one quick story. We ended the journey in Hawaii. What better way to end a 50-state journey in Hawaii in January, no less, when there was a lot of snow back here in Berks County in Pennsylvania. So it was a great way to finish the journey. And if anyone's ever interested in learning more about that journey, happy to share that. But excited to be here today as an alum, as a staff, as a former trustee at Albright. I feel like I'm back home. I joined the staff in January of this year after being a trustee for the last 5 years, as well as being an active alum over the, hate to say 40 plus or close to 40 years that since I graduated. Well, let me share my screen to allow us to get ready for the topic at hand. So let's do this here. And we go into slideshow mode and make sure everybody can see that. Looks good, Dave and others. You can see my slide there?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, good. So, and actually be remiss if I didn't mention the scenery behind me is part of Albright's campus. It's Rosner Hall on the corner of 13th and Rockland Street. It's where our School of Business is located, as well as my office, the president's office. A lot of student activity here in this building. If you haven't been to this part of the campus, it's great. We host some events here as well. So again, my background, class of 1985, and rejoined the staff here in January. I do share my email address and my phone number. I do encourage for those who want to reach out to me, especially if you're an alum in the area. I encourage you to reach out to me and we can have a deeper conversation. This topic can go on. I've had hours conversations with groups of alums around this. So we have an hour today. Hopefully you'll get a good idea of what's going on Albright, how we're addressing the challenges that are facing us. But I do encourage and invite you, anyone, to follow up with me to have a deeper conversation if you would like. Well, when we look at the agenda, these are the things I'm looking to cover in the next hour, and hopefully allow about 10, 15 minutes for questions here as well. Highlight really the key takeaways for the session today. I'll dive into what's happening in higher education. Yeah, Albright's not alone in terms of what's happening in higher education. We'll talk about that. But then we'll dive into what's Albright doing to respond to that, the specific initiatives we're taking, a little bit how we got here, and how we're looking to move forward, which will lead us into the future of Albright. The future that we see as a positive future for Albright in Northeast Reading and Berks County, and what that looks like at a level of detail. For those of you that are local and come by our campus, it's been about 4 years that we've had a physical building that we can call a library. We evacuated. I remember being at a trustee meeting where we voted to evacuate that building in December of 19. And that building has, quite honestly, been a little bit of an eyesore on campus. But we've got some exciting news to share in terms of where that's heading in the near time future. So we'll dive into that a little bit. And then just ways to support Albright, whether you're a community member, an alum, or just somebody that's interested in higher education, want to just share a little bit about how you can support Albright in your daily lives. And then again, we'll end with questions and answers. So when we look at key takeaways, right? So after your hour with us today, these are really the key things that you can walk away with and share with others that might be interested in Albright, whether it's in your Albright network, whether it's people you work with or people in your community or people in your social network. These are really the key things I would love for people to walk away with today. Higher education is a tough place to be. Higher education is, it's being challenged in the market. And pure demographics indicate that it's a tough place to be, right? 18 to 22-year-olds, when you look at the pure demographics of number of students available, they're down. And there's all sorts of stats behind that. So higher education is a tough place to be. And Albright is addressing that, but it also has its own challenges that take a flavor that are specific, obviously, to Albright. So that's number one. We're not alone in this world of higher education challenges. The second bullet I do have bolded because this is work that I'm actually proud that the trustees took on about 1.5 years ago, recognizing the changes that were coming in higher education, worked with a consulting firm called Keeling, and they delivered a report about a little over 1 year ago now in terms of what Albright had to do to continue to remain relevant and to deal with the changes that were going on in higher education. And I'll just read it quickly. Albright holds a particular and essential place in higher education in Reading and the communities that surround it. To make itself ready and able to advance students' lives, which is what it's done for years, Albright must be prepared to undergo radical, transformative change rather than carrying on business as usual. And that's really a big takeaway. When you look at the details that we're doing here at the college, we are going through radical changes, and not to say other institutions aren't either, but Albright is going through those changes in order to remain relevant, in order to continue to move forward as an institution and provide education to those students today and moving forward. So, if you will, an independent third-party validation of what has to be done in order for Albright to continue to thrive. And when you really look at Albright's mission, and I'll talk about in a couple of minutes how Albright tweaked its mission a little bit, and I say tweaked it did change it, but it's really more of a tweaking, because when we really addressed and shared that change of mission, when we shared it with the faculty said, you know what, this is what Albright has always done. So it really was solidifying wording around what Albright has done and continues to do, which is to make sure that the students that come to Albright today achieve the best education they can and allows them to be successful in life moving forward. And there's all sorts of metrics around that. One is called social mobility, in terms of where students go after they leave Albright, in terms of their economic power and their social access to things. And Albright ranks very high in that. And the Albright mission addresses that. And so when mission aligns with actual results, that's always a good thing. And then the fourth one gets to some financial challenges that Albright has had over the last 2 years. And again, when I go back to being a trustee, Albright knew it was going to have about 2 to 3 years of financials that were not going to be positive. And so the unfortunate thing is they were a little more negative, i.e. expenses were more than revenues, a little more than they expected. And so we have been going through a little bit more transformative, going back to that second bullet point, in terms of how we get ourselves ahead of the financials. And for those of you in the financial world, we use an approach called zero-based budgeting, which basically means, you know what, don't assume you're going to get the same budget you had last year and just increase it by 2 to 3%, which is a traditional model. Zero-based budgeting says, you know what, assume you got nothing, build the case for what you need, and if you will, for some areas like advancement and admissions, what's the ROI on that? When you get to the more academic side, what's the connection, obviously, to the student experience and so on. And that has allowed us to get our arms better around the financials, so that in this fiscal year, which we're in, and Albright runs on a fiscal year of June 1 to May 31st, so we're a little over a quarter the way through that, we are looking to be cash neutral in terms of revenue over expenses, and then in fiscal year 26, be positive. And so that's a big shift to the last 2 to 3 years where the financials of the college were negative. We'll go into some more detail of what we have done and are continuing to do to move that forward. So we're going to dive into these, but these are really the 4 key takeaways. I understand the slide deck will be shared with everyone, so you'll have that. Obviously, the copy of the video will be out there, so you'll be able to review in more detail. So let me move on to the next slide. So what's happening in higher ed? And John mentioned, Dave mentioned it, and we were chatting a little bit before we started as well, some of the details. It's hard to pick up a paper, any paper, but obviously those that deal with higher education, and see articles like you have here. These are probably now, I don't know, maybe a month old, these 2 articles here, but colleges are closing, and the rate at which they're closing are accelerating because of the issues. And some of the issues are, one, the competition that's out there. And again, the number of students that are 18 to 22-year-olds is just less. Pure demographics, you know, how many were born 18 years ago, you can track that. The numbers are less. COVID has a significant impact. A lot of institutions thought students would come back after COVID. They're not coming back at the rate that they thought. The issues with last year, and this is a little inside baseball with FAFSA, the Financial Aid, Federal Aid Financial Forum. There are a lot of issues with that in terms of students applying for financial aid. It was delayed. Normally, colleges like Albright get the first set of students and how much they can afford to come to college. We normally get that in October. We didn't get the first draft, or the first list, I should say, until March. So 6 months later. And we didn't get the last one until June. So that in this year added more stress. So there's a lot of stress on higher ed in terms of the business model of moving forward. So you see articles like these two in the papers. And while smaller colleges are probably a little bit more susceptible to this challenge, it's not all small colleges. You look at places like Penn State. Penn State needs to cut multi-million dollars out of their budget. You look at Drexel, and Drexel is looking at a budget shortfall that is forcing them to consider things. I actually think I saw something this morning pop in on my feed about Drexel is consolidating some of their colleges into one college and reducing some of the administrative costs. So not a day goes by for those that are following higher ed. And if you're not following higher ed that closely, probably not a month goes by that you don't see something like this that's indicating that the higher ed market is under stress. So it's not just Albright, gives us some comfort, but not total comfort that others are dealing with it. But it's a community and it's an industry that's looking to deal with a shift in the market in terms of how it's viewed, both from the media, both from parents, both from not both, but in addition, students as well, all different constituencies looking at whether higher ed is really worth it. You see articles about that. And yet there are a lot of stats that still show a college education allows students to get better jobs and such. But there's a lot of debate out there, and that's just the context for what's happening in higher ed. So let's move on. And this sort of sums up in some bullet points, right? During the past decade, many colleges have struggled to build sustainable financial models, i.e. revenues exceed expenses. Albright has been no different. And as I mentioned, the board knew that, and there were 2 or 3 years where the negative was going to be there. Again, some of the negatives a little higher than the board had planned for. A sharp decline in the birth rates has caused what they called the enrollment cliff, which is just the steep decline in the number of traditional students that are available. Now, some institutions, and Albright's doing this a little bit as well, looking at students that are going and looking to get degrees or certificates. Maybe they don't need a full degree. A certificate might suffice, and Albright has some of those available. There's also graduate programs that are part of Albright's repertoire. But the traditional 18 to 22 residential experience, which Albright still is its bread and butter, that number of students available, that enrollment cliff is happening as we speak. The American public faith in higher education has waned, and that gets to potentially the debt that some students have to undertake to get an education, as well as other factors in terms of the job placement rate and so on. The COVID-19 pandemic hit many colleges hard, and part of that reason is the federal government provided a lot of money during COVID for institutions to keep going. Some institutions, and Albright wasn't one of them, but some institutions didn't plan well for when that money ended. How do they become sustainable moving forward? Secondarily, the number of students that we thought would come back, and Albright did fall into this category, we thought would come back post-COVID, aren't coming back to the record number, not the record numbers, but the numbers they were pre-COVID. And so that double-edged impact there in terms of the COVID-19 impact. And then mentioned briefly earlier, the slow and faulty FAFSA, federal aid financial, I forget exact initials, but basically the financial aid process for when students apply, the information comes to colleges, what the family is expected to pay, so that colleges can offer the appropriate financial aid package. That was just all delayed last year. And as much as it impacted last year, there's still some ripple effect to, we believe, the impact that's going to happen this year. So this is sort of the main points as to the issues addressing higher ed, and again, Albright not being any exception. So what's Albright's response? What is Albright doing? And so when you look at Albright at a glance, and this is actually a sell sheet of ours, a couple things I just want to highlight. I mean, Albright, some things at its core are the same. And fundamentally, the size of Albright has gone down. We are at about 1,100 full-time undergrad students. The number here, 1,480, gets to those that are taking certificates and graduate courses. But the undergrad enrollment is around 1,100. When I was here in the 80s, it was about 1,300 to 1,400. Albright does need to get that undergrad enrollment from a financial perspective back to 1,300 in order to continue to sustain a financial model. And there's things underway to do that. And we can get into that. Albright is a very diverse community, and I would say much more diverse than other institutions, especially private institutions. We have a 54% ethnic diversity population here at Albright. And that is a very shift, I would say, from the 80s and the 90s, but it very much represents the demographics of Berks County. It represents the demographics of the world and Reading and so on in terms of the diverse population that exists as well as looking to attend college. And so we have that. One of the uniquenesses of Albright is the dual major or the co-major program. A number of our students, and I think there's 70% here, bottom right, opt to co-major. This has been a staple, I know, back in the 80s as well as today, where students look to get an education in not just one area, but they co-major, they dual major in multiple areas. And a lot of that is based on the variety of programs that Albright offers, and that gives the students a much broader base in terms of the education they receive. I do want to highlight, and I'll highlight this again a little later, in that as much as the focus on the dual major and the programs and making sure students can get jobs, Albright's focus has been and always will be grounded in the liberal arts education. As much as we need to make sure students have the skills they need to do a job, the communication skills, whether it's writing and verbal and the collaboration and the teamwork, all of those are still fundamental to Albright's program and approach to educating students. And so this is just a quick snapshot of where Albright is today. We do give a lot of financial aid out, and we've got to make sure we balance the financial aid aspect with what students can pay as well, because there's a metric called net tuition revenue, which is the fundamental amount that students pay. That has lowered in the last couple of years, and Albright has to look at how do we get that back up to a number that helps the financial model be sustainable. So the two key financial components that Albright is working on to make it more sustainable and financially stable is both the enrollment as well as what we call, again, this net tuition revenue, which is a balance of how much financial aid we give to what students can afford. And there's a lot of initiatives going on to accomplish both of those moving forward. Did want to just share this slide that talks about when students leave Albright. This is a stat as of the end of last year. About 19-20% of our alumni do stay in Berks County. And a number of them came from Berks County, so it makes sense as well. But they stay in Berks County, which is a great thing and a great message to those in Berks Alliance that the result of Albright students are staying in Berks County. And when you look at Pennsylvania as a whole, close to 60% of our alumni are in Pennsylvania. And so we're proud of that. And there's a lot that goes into that. Obviously, partnerships with community and corporate and organizations like Berks Alliance helps that become even a stronger number. One of the things Albright did back in the spring was brought in an interim president. And the focus of this was a number of things, but it had to do with the financial situation Albright was in. Again, a couple of years, we had negative financials, and we had to fix that. And so one of the things we did was look to someone who has done this before. And Albright is very fortunate that we were able to find Deborah Townsley, who was our interim president, joined us in July, who has done turnarounds, looking at the finances of the college, figuring out and making tough decisions for how an institution like Albright can turn around and continue to thrive. And so interim presidents like this stay for about 12, 18, maybe 2 years and help make the difficult decisions, but yet keeping Albright vibrant and relevant in moving forward. And so this is Deborah's 5th institution that she's worked at. It's a sign of the times in terms of institutions going through these changes, but she has helped institutions before make these changes. So she's been with us in July, and she's experienced in these types of decisions that need to be made. And so we're excited and fortunate that Deborah is with us leading the charge. And so one of the first things she did, and I sort of foreshadowed this a little earlier, was updated the mission. And again, when shared with the faculty and shared with others, it was like, this makes sense. And not to minimize what the mission was before, but this was a little bit more concrete. And it allows really a tangible outcome. So I'll just read it quickly. Mission of Albright is to provide students with an education that enables them to live their best lives now and in the future. We immerse students in impactful experiences that foster social mobility and ensure exceptional outcomes through real-world engagement, a supportive community, and a distinctive co-major program rooted in the liberal arts and sciences. A lot to unpack there. I could go on for probably an hour on this. I won't do so. But all to say, we felt we needed to get a little more concrete with this mission because mission drives action. And so what were some of those actions? One of them was, again, getting our arms around the financials of the college. And in fiscal year 25, which we're in, a fiscal year runs for Albright June through May. So June 1st of 24 started our fiscal 25 fiscal year. And so, again, a budgeting approach that said, you know what, don't assume you have anything from the year before. How do you build a budget that matches fundamentally the revenues that you had? Some of the things we had to do was we had to renegotiate some major contracts that were unfortunately not in Albright's favor. And happy to report that we're probably about 80% of the way there. Our partners have been great to work with. They understand the situation, and they're working with us to make sure it's a win-win situation. We have had reductions in force. We have had those Albright employees leave Albright in a way, again, to look at the areas that we could reduce staff and allow the college to still continue, minimizing the impact to the student experience. It was about a 10 to 12% reduction in force when you look at when all was said and done. Some of it happened in May. The rest of it's actually happened this month for the most part, September, October. So we are through that period, and Albright's in a much better position. For those of you in other industries, reductions in force are not uncommon as business models are looked at, and you look to align revenues with expenses. We scaled back operations, and fundamentally, we're focusing on what Albright has always done well, which is the undergrad and graduate education programs and services. We started to drive fundraising more. We're excited about where we are with fundraising. We have 100% trustee support, and actually at a rate of 3 times their support from prior years. So the trustees are behind this. We're talking a lot to our very generous alumni and donors, and a lot of them are on board as well, because there's a fundraising component to assuring we financially are stable as well. One of the things that we've done is manage the departure of TXPL. TXPL stands for Total Experience Learning. They were with Albright for a couple of years. They came to us from the Conrad Weiser School District. They had moved on to Alvernia University back in May or June time period, and we wish them well there. But Albright had before and will continue to have a focus on higher education. And we're very fortunate that we have a higher education experienced leader in educational innovation. I'm going to introduce her in a minute to share a little more detail about what's going on our educational innovation front. Very excited about how we're addressing all levels of education and how teaching pedagogies work, and we're excited about that. We've looked at one-time revenue opportunities to help get our finances on board. And what we mean by that, where we had some property, as an example, that was extraneous to the college based on things happening over the years. Actually, near and dear to my heart, Albright Court, which was 13th and Amity, was a dorm back in the 80s. It was last used during COVID, actually, as the isolation ward. Ever since then, it was vacant. And so we were able to work with a partner called SPAC Group that is going to actually renovate that building and make it accessible apartments for the community. And so we were able to sell that as one-time revenue to the college. And there's a couple other one-time revenue examples. Again, to get our budget revenue and expenses equal this year until we can get to a more sustainable model. And knock on wood, as much as we had enrollment challenges, we met our enrollment goals for the year. We were aggressive actually in some high-level goals, but what we budgeted at, we were actually over what we budgeted for enrollment. First-time class of about 380, 390. I think we're getting numbers this week to finalize, but we're in that ballpark of first-time students, whether they were freshmen or transfers in. And so we're very excited about that. It shows that the Albright value and the education that they provide is still a value to those looking to come. So all to say, this year is about aligning our cost structure with the revenues that are coming in from enrollment and fundraising. And so let me turn it over for a couple of minutes to my colleague, Christine Remley, who just joined us, I think a couple of months ago. I think we're out of the weeks, maybe in the months in terms of she's been here, but very excited with her leadership in educational innovation. And Christine, if you want to maybe take the helm a little bit and share a little bit about what Albright's doing in this space.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Dr. Christine Remley, and I joined Albright on August 19th. And I came here from Dallas, Texas, UNT Dallas, where I served there for 3 years as their Dean of the College of Education. That college was is only 15 years old, and I was a critical piece of the foundation of their Department of Education, their School of Education. Prior to that, I had been at Lock Haven University since 2004. And I started as an assistant professor and did full rank and tenure through department chair of their education department, and then served as interim dean while Lock Haven was going through the merger in the PASHE system. And you may be familiar that Lock Haven, Bloomsburg University, and Mansfield University merged into the Commonwealth University back in 2021. And it was shortly after that time that I decided to take a position in Dallas, Texas. I loved my time in Dallas, and then my daughter, she went and had a baby, and I decided to move back home to Pennsylvania. And now I'm with my 5-month-old grandson as much as possible, who lives right down the road there in Chester County in Honeybrook. But enough about me. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we have managed the departure of TXPL, which was a major contributor to Albright College during their time. But one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that education at Albright has been around for many, many decades, and there has been a legacy of excellence in the education programs. I was brought in as the Dean of Educational Innovation, and then Dr. Townsley asked me to serve in a different role to continue to coach, mentor, and build the educational innovation programs, as well as serve as an associate vice president of academic affairs. And I am very pleased to be able to help Albright College in that capacity. We have a rich tradition of educating teachers. Many of you know that teachers and the teacher pipeline is in crisis. That is across the country. It was happening on the West Coast, and it's happening on the East Coast, where we have multiple openings as we start the school year. And that happens for a lot of reasons. And teachers have really struggled since COVID. We had a fairly older workforce into the late teens, because in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it was very, very difficult to get a teaching job, believe it or not. They had several hundred applications for just 2 or 3 positions. Well, our workforce aged, and now if they went to school in the 1980s, well, they have done their 35 years now, and they got out of the workforce, and COVID just exacerbated that a little bit and moved that a little quicker. Now we have too many openings and not enough young people to fill those openings. We here understand that experiential learning is just one way of teaching our students. We continue to provide those field experiences, but we also provide pedagogy such as constructivism and behaviorism, maybe looking at reflective pedagogy, inquiry-based, project-based, case-based, and the list goes on. So if you're interested in any of those kinds of things, by all means, feel free to reach out to me, C. Remley at albright.edu, and I'm more than happy to go into a little more detail. We offer undergraduate programs in the pre-K4 area, in the 7 to 12 area in math, English, science, and history. And then we also have an online graduate program, which serves teachers across the state to allow them to get certified in our post-baccalaureate program. And just recently, we launched our 4+1 degree, which allowed our undergraduate students to take some graduate courses while they're still an undergraduate student. And that reduces the number of graduate courses they have. So in just 5 years, they graduate with a master's degree and fully certified to go into the classroom. Next slide, please. So as we look forward to the School of Educational Innovation, we are looking at ways to provide cutting-edge education, cutting-edge opportunities. We have 2 full-time faculty. And once we get our feet under us financially, we hope to be able to expand the School of Educational Innovation with looking at additional faculty who can integrate computers, artificial intelligence. You'll see the virtual reality and taking them on virtual field trips, and really producing high quality, well-prepared first-year teachers to go into the classroom, working in collaboration. All of our undergraduate students, we have asked that they student teach in Berks County, keeping them close to home, keeping them close to the university, and hopefully giving them an opportunity to be employed by the schools in Berks County, which are the schools where we serve. Our graduate students, because it's an online program, may be a little further out, but we also work with them and let them know, do not forget where your home is. Your home here is at Albright. So I think that is do I have one more slide, Tom?
Nope, that was it.
That was
Christine.
it.
Thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them for you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Again, a topic that Christine could go on a lot longer and deeper for anyone that's interested in that. So see Remley at Albright, or you'll see my name at the end. You come to me, I'll get you to her. So one of the key areas at Albright is continuing to invest in because of the need in the market. So thank you, Christine, and look forward to continue to work with you at Albright here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So again, fiscal year 25, we're getting our finances in order. We made some reductions in order to do that, some one-time revenue, so that our financial model this year, our revenue and expenses are much closer than they were in the past. And so then what's next, right? When we look at fiscal year 26, how do we make sure that we're in a sustainable model moving forward so that revenue and expenses, again, ideally revenue is higher than expenses, which the detailed numbers, start to show that. And anyone's interested in that, we can, again, meet separately. But here's one of the things that's going to be happening, and you'll see this, come out in the press in November. We will be looking to reduce some programs and faculty headcount. Just this morning, Elizabethtown College, another college, just announced they were reducing faculty. This is sort of, if you will, the last step of our staff reduction for the college to get it right-sized. And what's been happening for the last 2 to 3 months is a review of all the programs. And fundamentally, where is the need from the students? Are there students in these programs? Unfortunately, Albright and higher education in general has had programs where they're no longer relevant, but yet the faculty size and the programs, didn't adjust accordingly. And so those are the stages we're in now. We have a board meeting at the end of October where they're going to approve appropriate number of faculty and programs that will be reduced from Albright starting next fiscal year. A lot of detail as to why it takes that long, but it has to do with faculty and tenure and all sorts of things that we don't have time to get into detail. But that's going to be one of the key announcements, decisions that we're making to right-size Albright on the faculty side. And again, very few students will be impacted because the majority of these programs, if you can probably count on one hand the number of students that are majoring in those. However, we do have an obligation to those students to make sure that if indeed they wanted to stay with that program, we would help them figure out what is next for them. So any students that are impacted, we will be working with them closely, but the numbers will be very few. It really is a faculty reduction initiative that will be taking place. The other things that are happening is we are looking to increase revenue. As I mentioned earlier, increasing enrollment, getting back to that 1,400 undergrad student body side is key for Albright. And we have revamped everything we're doing with admissions, and we can dive into this in more detail. But we need to increase. We get over 6,000 applicants that are interested in Albright. We accept over 4,000. Right now, we're getting close to 400 a year. We need to increase what's called that yield from those we accept to those that attend. And there's some low-hanging fruit from a pure business practice and process perspective. We know we can do that. Excuse me. We've brought in some new leadership and new practices and to drive that. And we're going to be sharing all of those results. We rolled that out to the faculty last week, so they understand their involvement. At the core, it's being in front of those prospective students sooner, more often, and more engaging. It's not rocket science, but it's about, because we're in a competitive market and the number of students are less, how do you make sure you acquire them, which is them attending, you get to them earlier, you get to them more often, and you engage with them. And a lot of detail behind that. I'm not looking to minimize that, but that's the core of how enrollment will look to be increased. And the financial aid, this net tuition revenue that I mentioned earlier, which is called the discount rate, is part of that strategy. As I also mentioned, fundraising, which I'm privileged and humbled to lead here at Albright, already getting some good traction with some of our closest and generous donors, and looking to share the message even more broader and look to grow philanthropic support for the college. We're already ahead of where we were last year, and we're about 25-30% towards where we need to be in this fiscal year, which I'm excited about, and very, very fortunate we have people that care about Albright. I'm sure those on this call are part of that group as well. And not to minimize, we want to optimize and leverage other revenue opportunities. We have a great campus here, and we do have events on campus, but we believe there's more opportunity to have more events on campus throughout the year, taking use of the buildings we have, our athletic facilities, our dorms in the summer. There's more opportunity there to leverage the campus year-round for external entities. And so if any of you represent an organization that wants to look into that, we're happy to chat with you there. But those are the three revenue components that we're laser focused on to get the revenue side even stronger than it is today. We'll continue to reduce expenses where we need to. We'll continue to reduce debt that the college has, and there's strategies behind that are very detailed financially. We're working with our finance committee and our investment committee to manage that. And again, there are a couple other properties that are tangential to the college that the college owns that we're looking to sell in the short term to help keep that balance between revenue and expenses. So our goal, and we've got financials behind it, is that the college is revenue positive in fiscal year 26 and beyond as we accomplish these initiatives. And so when we look at the future of Albright, and we look at how we market Albright, and Christine being one of our leaders here in educational innovation, this is how we look to market Albright moving forward. We've got a focus on business and professional studies. We've got a focus on educational innovation that Christine talked to us, and the arts and sciences, right? Whether it's pre-med and the liberal arts itself, all of those are part of the arts and sciences focus. And so this is where our messaging will be in terms of how students' education will help them be successful in any of those areas. Excuse me. And when you look at the ROI, the return on investment, and the student outcomes, these are recent. Actually, I have to update one of these because I just heard in the last week that first one went from ranked in top 31 nationally on social mobility. I think it ranked number 22. I just heard that. Didn't update the slide yet. Top 88 best value colleges were ranked 81 at best liberal arts, were recognized career development. The outcomes, i.e. the students that leave Albright, are being successful. It goes back to the mission of living their best lives, not just while they're here, but once they leave Albright, whether it's getting a job or going to grad school or med school, whatever it might be, the results are showing it. It's being recognized in a lot of different rankings that are out there. And so the outcomes are there. Albright's continuing to focus on the education that students get in order to continue with those outcomes. And a bunch of slides here. I just pulled this from the website just to give a spectrum of all the different programs that Albright offers. Excuse me, in the different category. I'm not going to read these, but you can see, and there's majors and co-majors and there's certificates. These are all undergrad opportunities in all different areas. And you can see just the breadth and depth of programs that Albright continues to offer. Here are some of the graduate programs that we have in the different focus areas in business leadership, as Christine talked about, education and teaching. And again, it could be a certificate, not a degree. So there's that flexibility for students that don't need the full degree, but they want to get certified in a certain area. Albright's got that flexibility as well. And here's just a little more spotlight on the certificates. So all to say, highlighting the breadth and depth of the academic programs that Albright has to offer its students today and tomorrow. So a quick thing, and then we'll get into questions here on, what people fondly talk to as the library. More formally, we talk about it as a Student Success Commons and Library. It's the building on campus, right off of 13th Street. You can see the picture here. It's built in 1964, and it's got a long legacy at Albright. Again, in December of 19, the college evacuated the building because of some structural things, and it hasn't been occupied since. The actual function of what was in the library was dispersed to other areas of the college, but the physical building has been sitting there. What Albright did this past summer, and again with Deborah's leadership, Deborah's had experience, our interim president, in construction projects as part of moving a college forward. And so what we are able to do is basically reposition what we're doing with the library and reposition it as a renovation versus a rebuild. We actually had a $22 million design building. Well, you know what? We didn't raise $22 million. We raised $14 million. And we currently have about 10 to 12 of cash on hand based on work that's already been done. And so we're looking to build a building with the money we have. So we're being financially responsible, fiscally responsible with the money we have. And so we've worked with construction management firms. We're getting final bids as we speak this week to say, you know what? We have this amount of cash available. We need the building opened up next fall. And all of the conversations have been very positive about realigning and readjusting what we need to do to bring this building back online to be a student success commons. So it's not just a library. It still has some of those things we talked about earlier, but the design of the building is scaling back to the financials that we have. And so we're laser focused on assuring this will continue. This fall, we're looking to have physical presence of that. And for those that have been financially supportive of this project, we're continuing to communicate with them more details as to the schedule. Excuse me. And so finally, just ways to support Albright, whether you're an alum, whether you're a community member, we encourage you to partner with us. If you might have opportunities to support an Albright student of today, whether you're working with a faculty member, working on career mentoring, there's all sorts of opportunities that we have on that front. If you're talking to those looking to go to college, whether it's traditional students or those going to get a certificate or graduate, promote Albright, connect them to us, let us talk to them about the different programs we have. We do continue to do events on campus. We have the theater, we have other events, we have lectures on campus. encourage yourself and your family and your network to come to them as well. And for those of you that are so inclined, philanthropically supporting the college as well, whether it's financial, but time, talent, and treasure, those are all welcome as ways to continue to support Albright. It's a lot of components that make any institution move forward. And these are just sort of outlining a little more detail of how anyone can look to support Albright moving forward. So that's our last slide. And again, I leave my contact information up here as a way to encourage anyone who wants to go into any deeper discussion on any of this. I'm happy to do that, happy to reach out. But David, if there's questions that come in,
Yep.
Did I read them or you want to read them to me, or what's the
No,
best way?
I'll share the questions I've gotten that Christine hasn't answered already for us. She's done a
Okay.
bunch of good answers here. It's not just Albright that's confronting these challenges, as you mentioned. You talked about other schools. One of those schools is Drexel, Tom, that you mentioned. And I knew Albright had some sort of relationship that was in the process of being developed. I'm not sure how far along it got with Drexel. What's the consequences of both schools going through some sort of challenge?
Yeah, I would say, we've had conversations with Drexel and quite honestly with the other institutions where we look to partner for different reasons, whether it's articulation agreements with community colleges or whatever it might be. I would say at this point that there aren't any strategic that I'm aware of, let me put it that way, strategic conversations with Drexel going on. Obviously, they're a neighbor in the area. And so, maybe some informal conversations about how we can support them. But I would say no strategic conversations at the level of impacting, the financials of either.
One of the things I think is pretty evident about walking through, as I do almost daily, walking through the Albright campus, is the student population seems to be very different than what it historically had been. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How diverse it is?
Yeah, thank you. It is very diverse. It's 54% underrepresented populations on campus. And so whether it's African American, Hispanic, I think the Hispanic population, we're at 22 to 23%, depending how we count numbers. But 52 to 54% underrepresented populations, and that is different. That's been a strategy of Albright to represent the demographics of both the local area and if you will, the United States a little bit. And so we all part of Albright's mission is to provide the education for those that have the academic ability to get an education, but sometimes might not have had the financial access to it. And that's the balance that Albright runs on the financial side, making sure that the financials still work when you're providing access to education from families. There's a lot of first-gen students. I don't know, Christine, if you know that number. I don't think I know it off the top of my head, but a lot more first-gen students these days than there were back in the day. A lot of Pell eligible, and Pell is the program from the federal government for those that with income under a certain level. So our population is diverse in the demographics and the ethnicities, as well as the financial capacity of our learners. And so part of the strategy, yes, but how do we make sure we balance that to keep the financial stability of the college moving forward?
For 2024, our first-gen students this year were at 46%.
Thank you, Christine.
So that's significant, very significant.
It is, yeah.
Tom, you mentioned about selling properties, and you talked about the one building that was being sold. I know Albright owns a bunch of houses in the area. They've owned a bunch of the Woodland Hills properties. I know they've also owned properties in other communities. What properties are you targeting to sell, or is that whatever people want to buy?
Well, it's at the core, it's property that's not being used, if you will, for the core educational mission of the college. I would say one that we're close to selling, I can say it. We own property, Albright owns property near the Wawa, which is on 13th and, 12th and 11th and Richmond, I believe, if I got my geography right. We own about an acre worth of property back there that, back, I don't know, when we acquired it 8 to 10 years ago, we had visions for something, but those plans didn't happen. And so it's been sitting there. And so that's property that's actually on the market, and we're in significant conversations. There are some of the college housing that is part of the inventory that we're looking to sell. Some of that housing is some offices of the college, but the college has other spaces for them, as an example. So anything that's in those houses, we're able to find other locations for them. So again, we're trying to make sure it's not going to disrupt anything with the core component of the undergrad and graduate education that we provide.
We had a person raise her hand. I'm going to let her speak, Cindy Quintner. Cindy, do you have a question? Meanwhile, I'm going to keep going on. You talked about early on, Tom, about radical transformative change. What is that going to mean for Albright? Is it going to be, how different is it going to be?
Well, I think some examples of that fall into eliminating programs and reducing faculty. I mean, I think traditionally higher ed, and Albright's no exception, right? Faculty, and this is not being negative, it's just the way higher education has worked, where faculty sort of, we're always going to be around. And what's happening in higher education in general, it's being operated more as a business where you got revenue and expenses and you got to figure it out. And there's only so much you can do on the non-faculty side, especially when the demand from the student and the learners isn't there anymore. And to Albright's credit, I will say they've made some of those changes over the years. I'll give a quick story. I was a computer science major here at Albright. And during my trustee tenure, I'm sitting at a meeting and they're getting ready to eliminate the computer science major. And I'm like, well, how can you do that? That was my major. Well, the reason was that back in the 80s, computer science being a major was the thing to do. It was new, it was out there. But now computer science doesn't need to be a major at a place like Albright. It's a co-major. You major, or you co-major computer science with business or whatever, or with medicine. So it's a co-major versus a major. So that's what was happening. And so Albright has done a lot of that work over the years, to their credit and to the faculty credit. But the radical transformation is, there's more programs that just probably need to go away because there's one or two students interested, right? Versus the 20 or 30 that might have been there back in the 90s or 80s or whenever. And so those are examples of the radical changes we're making to make sure that we can still do well what we do well, but potentially not being as entrepreneurship in some of these other things that Albright has been doing over the last 8 to 10 years that unfortunately the return wasn't there that we had thought.
Christine, you mentioned focusing on trying to train people to be teachers because of the incredible demand for teachers. Are there other occupations in Berks County that you guys are targeting, that you're having conversations with employers to try to meet their needs?
So I can actually only speak to teachers. I've been in Berks County 2 months, and so I would hesitate to speak to that as I don't have that information. I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I don't have detail either, but I would say our counterpart in our School of Business is looking at those opportunities. I would say that's a new shift to make sure the programs we offer are appropriate for where the market and the corporate world and government world, whatever, life post Albright needs. So I would say we're early on in being more aggressive on that, in that. So if any of you represent any of those organizations, we're happy to connect you with folks that are leading that conversation to continue to develop programs that meet what the market is looking for.
And a couple questions, one of which is a fairly general one about, are you going to close the swimming pool since you eliminated the swim team?
The swimming pool is an interesting one. We're looking to see, and there's opportunities with local areas to see how we can put that pool to use. And so there are discussions going on how to make that pool still an active part of the campus, even though we don't have the teams, that the diminish of that just occurred. I would say, the number of students that use that pool has diminished in general also. And I don't know the exact ones, but I know there's other areas, other organizations that have closed their pools as well. So it's another, I'll just, with air quotes, right, a shift in, the value of a pool. But we are looking to figure out the role it plays at Albright moving forward.
I know there are at least three members of the Board of Trustees on the conversation, so I'm going to ask if they want to say anything, or three current or former members, Sue Parati, John Weidenhammer, and Mike Reese. Do any of you want to say anything quickly here in the brief seconds we have left?
Mike Reese here. I tell you, it's really exciting being part of this turnaround. And Tom, a running buddy from back in the past, is doing a great job. And I'm excited for the future for Albright, especially being an alum and a lifelong resident of Reading. Mom still lives around 8 blocks from the college. She's 91 years old. So I'm very excited. So thank you, Tom and Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike's a member of our 13th Street gang, right? It's the only place, I don't know if it's the world, I keep meaning to check, but I know only place in the United States where you can get a full education on one street. And Michael's a proud member of that, and might be others on the call as well. And members like Mike and others, and thank you, Sue, and obviously John, for joining. And Sue's an alum and a former trustee and doing great work at Tower Health. It's partnerships with everyone that's making this effort possible. And I'll also say, right, we want to partner with whoever wants to partner with us moving forward at any capacity. There's a lot that people can bring to the solutions. We Albright Higher Education are in uncharted territory at some level. And as much as those of us who are here every day are working diligently, we know there's a lot of ideas and partnerships out there that can also help Albright moving forward. So we encourage those conversations moving forward. And we're thankful for a lot of them that have been happening.
Yeah, and there were several questions about partnerships with other colleges. There was a question about whether the Albright would consider merging into another institution. Do you want to talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, I would say there's, you never know where the future goes, right? And so you never say never. All I can say right now is the plan for Albright moving forward, do not factor that into the picture. We are looking at partnerships from a transfer articulation, especially from community colleges and such, in terms of how we can offer a seamless education. We actually have a couple scholarships in place where someone coming from RAC right to Albright can get a scholarship. And so those right now are the discussions going on with colleges. And, also on the back end, right? When people leave Albright, what opportunities do we want to have in place in partnership? So whether it's a graduate degree or whatever, they can go on to other institutions to make their continued learning appropriate. So those are the real discussions going on with colleges and universities as Albright looks at least to the short-term future.
So what's Albright going to look like in 5 years? It's going to be here. What's it going to be looking like?
The plan is it'll be here. It'll be here in a way that has, I would say, is financially stronger than it is today. And it's probably more in tune with how do we continue to evolve the programs that we offer to continue to meet the needs of the learners of 5 years from now, right? We want to continually to be creative and to evolve our programs so that we are continuing to meet them, whether as much as the undergrad education still looks to be the core. We want to make sure we provide the education for those learners that, are coming back maybe in their mid-20s and they have families. And we want to make sure that their educational journey can still be met at Albright, even if it doesn't meet the traditional undergrad, 4 years on campus. Although, again, that should be the core of Albright, but being a little bit more nimble in these other areas, along with the programs that support the needs of the market.
Well, thank you both. This has been a very encouraging, still scary, but very encouraging conversation. And we look forward to Albright being an anchor in this community for a long time. We will send a copy of the recording to everyone who registered for the event. We'll post it on the Berks Alliance website. We will share it with our friends at BCTV. Tom, if you're okay, we'll share your PowerPoint with everybody who registered as well.
Please do. Thank you.
And I'll go through the list of questions and comments and see if there's anything that we missed that we can, that Christine hasn't already answered for us. That we've missed that I can share with you guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I see we have a outgoing president of Kutztown on our visit today. Hi, Ken. Thank you both for a terrific presentation, and I think hopefully it's helped us turn a corner and feel more encouraged about the future here of Albright College. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Berks Alliance, and thank you, everybody, for attending. We look forward to continued conversations and your support of Albright. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.